Hi, I'm Tammy Potter, and welcome to the Pregnancy Process Podcast, a show designed to help you navigate the hugely transformative journey to motherhood, where you'll hear the unique experience of experts in this area and the incredible stories of women sharing their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys so that you can have a healthier, more informed pregnancy. In today's episode, I talk to renowned Eastern medicine practitioner and holistic fertility coach, Dr. Juli Yelnick, who returns to share her deeply personal experience with endometriosis and the path she took to healing with traditional Chinese medicine. If you've ever felt lost or dismissed after an endometriosis diagnosis, or been told that surgery is your only option, this episode is for you. Dr. Yelnick explains why Western medicine often struggles to provide clear answers or lasting solutions, and how traditional Chinese medicine offers a radically different individualized approach. We'll explore how Eastern medicine views endometriosis not as a single disease, but as a collection of unique patterns, each with its own root causes and symptoms. You'll hear practical advice on how to avoid common pitfalls in self-treatment, and why understanding your specific pattern is the key to lasting relief and improved fertility. Whether you're seeking answers, hope, or a new way forward, this episode invites you to take control of your health and fertility, guided by ancient wisdom and real-life success stories. Julie, thank you so much for your time today. It's fantastic to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me back. I really enjoy our discussions.
Me too. And I feel like we're really digging into everything Eastern medicine when it comes to fertility and women's health. We've already done a very large overview. We've spoken in depth around PCOS. And in this episode, we're going to be talking all things understanding endometriosis through the Eastern medicine lens. So again, I thank you so much for your time and sharing so generously from your absolute wealth of knowledge. And I think the best place to start, like we did previously, is for listeners who may not be familiar with endometriosis. Can you explain what it is from, say, a Western medicine perspective before we get into the Eastern? What are the main signs, symptoms, and diagnostic criteria?
Sure. And I think that's really important because actually similarly to when we discussed PCOS on a previous episode, endometriosis is one of those conditions where so many women suspect that they have it, but the actual diagnosis of it is a little bit elusive. So in Western medicine, they would define endometriosis as the condition where you have endometrial-like tissue that should just be growing inside your uterus. It's also growing outside of your uterus. So whether that's on the outside of your uterus or whether it's on your ovaries or your fallopian tubes, it can even create these adhesions of tissue on completely non-reproductive related organs like on your intestines, your bladder, etc. So most women who think they might have endometriosis would go in for that diagnosis because they have really painful periods or they have irregular, painful, problematic periods. And usually it's marked by severe cramping, not always. Usually you'll notice darker period blood colors, which means a lot more to us in traditional Chinese medicine than it does to the Western doctors. But those are the types of things that a woman might go into the doctor's office in Western medicine thinking, I think I have endometriosis. Unfortunately, there is not one test that they can do, like a lab test, to see if you have it. So it really goes along with those symptoms, like my periods are very heavy, very painful, things like that. In order to find out if there is that endometrial tissue growing outside the uterus, which is the definition of endometriosis, they would actually have to take a peek inside. So they would have to do usually laparoscopic look inside. So it comes in what we would call like diagnosis by treatment. So they would go in one time with a little incision and they are both looking for the tissue and then hopefully usually removing the tissue with that in the same process. So if they see it, they can take it off. The adhesions can be removed, for example, but not so much prevented from coming back in Western medicine. So that's the elusive picture of what endometriosis would look like for most people.
And sadly, it's something that affects so many women as well. And I know that the diagnosis of that is quite long and tedious, because I feel like sometimes women's symptoms, and I won't go off on a tangent here, but I feel like sometimes women's symptoms around their cycles, especially when they're younger, they get dismissed a little bit. But I think that's a whole other story.
It is important to note because the average diagnosis time for endometriosis is between 7 and 10 years from when a woman first presents with really bad periods or really feels like something's off or wrong at the doctor's office. It usually takes between 7 and 10 years to confirm the diagnosis of endometriosis. And really, it's not that easy to blow off these symptoms because they are very intense. What people don't understand that's happening with endometriosis, and again, I speak from experience because I had this and it was so problematic. What's happening is each month, instead of just your uterine lining on the inside of your uterus responding to the hormones that are saying, time to shed, time to inflame and shed and release and have your period, instead of it just affecting that inside lining of the uterus, because your tissue is growing all over outside of the uterus, all of that other tissue is responding to those signals as well each month. So your cramps essentially are all over your abdominal cavity sometimes. And to be able to to think that women are being dismissed from with that type of severe symptoms is actually, it's terrible. So I'm glad that more people are talking about it. And I think that we don't need to know necessarily, everyone doesn't need to know every single detail about every hormone level they have at every time, every medical term for everything in their body. No, but it is helpful to understand the basic concepts of what's happening. That lining that's supposed to be inside is now outside, or you're developing these, which we can talk about later, like secondary circumstances where you would get more like tumors of endometrial growth outside of the uterus as well, or in. So those things are so painful that to dismiss those is really, hopefully we're not going to do that very much longer. More women are getting more attention for this so we can get help.
So an average diagnosis of 7 to 10 years in a more traditional Western style medical institution, let's call it.
Mhm.
How would that look like if someone was coming to you with these symptoms in a traditional Chinese medicine sense?
Yeah, the good news is it would never take us 7 to 10 years to figure out what's going on. Thank goodness. What I would love to tell women is that if you're having any of these symptoms that we're discussing in this episode, please consider seeking help from a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, because we can interpret those things that you're experiencing and figure out what's causing yours. And that way we can get to work resolving it sooner than waiting 7 to 10 years. So we would look at what type of endometriosis you have or what type of symptoms and signs you're having. And that tells us what's causing it for you, because different underlying causes can be present across different women that all would get the same diagnosis of endometriosis. So I would say, tell me about your period, and then tell me about your average monthly cycles, if there is such a thing as your average. And if they tell me things like, it's really about the cramps, the stabbing, intense cramps. Personally, this is where it got me. I would have to hold on to my desk in high school because the cramp would be so painful I couldn't breathe or stand up. So if it's really intense cramps, that means it's usually caused by what we would call liver blood stasis. So liver blood stasis is probably the most common cause of endometriosis, and it goes with other signs and symptoms like having a purplish red tongue. Even people have purple dots on their tongue sometimes if it's really bad. If we look underneath their tongue, there'll be two usually veins that are just full of dark black blood under there. The other around the body symptoms that you might have with liver blood stasis would be sharp pains in other places, particularly one-sided headache, migraine presentations, jaw pain, or shoulder pain. Those would be the most common ones with this pattern of imbalance. But when it comes to your period, we really see it. It's like that stabbing, sharp cramps that take your breath away. And it also usually comes with clots larger than a grape, for example. They can be lime-sized even with this pattern of imbalance. So that would be the first thing we would look for. Is it this main underlying cause that's causing your endometriosis? If it doesn't look like, that's when we can start to branch out and say, okay, it can also be caused by a couple of these other imbalances. And maybe one of those looks more like your situation. And then we would go from there.
It's amazing, isn't it? And can you walk us through the other patterns of imbalance? And
Sure.
maybe
Yeah.
do a little bit of a deep dive into the 5 branches of traditional Chinese medicine and how you'd use them to treat endometriosis?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start, since I've already gone into the one main pattern of imbalance, which is liver blood
Mhm.
stasis. That will, like, the purple things. Okay. So to expand on some of the signs and symptoms you might have that are causing, if liver blood stasis is what's causing your endometriosis, you'll have purple things. So whether it's your tongue looking quite purple, your actual complexion sometimes looks quite purplish, your lips will be purplish, your nail beds will be purplish. All of these are signs of blood stasis, that the blood is just not able to freely flow through your body. And that causes a lot of problems with uterine blood, because the entire point of the monthly cycle is for you to be able to thoroughly and efficiently and painlessly, ideally, shed all of that blood each month. And if there's too much stasis, the blood is slowly moving. It's getting stuck along the way. It's not able to be pumped out efficiently and smoothly. And that's why you're getting all these sharp stabbing cramps of your period. Also, I look at facial reading a bit for this, because in traditional Chinese medicine, we also do what's called ancient traditional face reading. And so the color and complexion of someone's facial skin will often have a lot of those, like, brown spots, or they might be called sunspots or liver spots. But when someone has a lot of the brown spots on their face, that is an indication of liver blood stasis too. The lip, right above the upper lip, there will often be actual dark spots. So if you look really closely right above someone's upper lip, and spots of either, yeah, I can try to, I don't know if our camera quality will pick it up right now, but at home with a close-up mirror and good lighting, or when I have women who come into my fertility coaching program, we start with, like, your pictures, right? Your tongue pictures and your face pictures, to get a sense of where things are at before we start doing the work that I'll describe. And if I see those dark spots either on the face or right above the lip, especially, I know it's probably about liver blood stasis. Yeah. But if the person says, no, I don't really have bad periods, I don't really have the sharp stabbing cramps, and I don't really have big clots in my period, I don't think this is me, and I don't think that's what's causing my endometriosis. Absolutely possible. That's fine. And then we move on to the other common patterns of imbalance that can also cause endometriosis. So one of them is spleen qi deficiency with an accumulation of dampness. So when our spleen qi, which essentially is like all your digestive power and metabolic power in the body, when that is not enough, when you don't have enough of that spleen qi to power your digestion, then you don't have enough nutrients coming in that are clean and clear and being utilized in the right way. And at the same time, the other half of that is things are getting gummed down and sluggish and slow as a result of this just damp goo being allowed to sit around, not transformed into nutrients and not effectively eliminated. It just creates dampness sitting around the body. And so anytime we have excess dampness, it starts to congeal and make what we call phlegm, or phlegm balls even. And that's like really tight, dry dampness sitting around on your organ system. So we talked about this too with PCOS, where whenever we have too much dampness accumulating in the reproductive organs, we'll generally see that as cysts. But we can also see it as other manifestations of too much tissue that's not supposed to be there. So we can see it as fibroids. We can see it as endometrial adhesions, in this case, talking about endometriosis. And again, it comes back to ultimately your spleen qi. Your digestive power wasn't strong enough to transform away that excess damp goo. And now it's sitting around sticking to things and causing things to work slowly and inefficiently. So when we see that, we need to attack it almost in a two-pronged method. We want to clear away that extra damp phlegm that's accumulating, but then we ultimately want to follow that through to prevent it from happening again. We would need to strengthen your spleen qi, or that digestive fire or digestive power that really is the ultimate source of when something's not working well enough. We want to fix the problems it created, but then we also want to go full circle and fix the ultimate underlying problem. And that's what it's so beautiful. We can see you have this problem or this imbalance, but a lot of those are called what we call secondary patterns of imbalance, where they're like the result of another underlying pattern of imbalance that's more core or more central in your body. So for us, attacking one of the branch manifestations is not enough. It's never enough to just, like, in Western medicine, they would laser off or cut off your endometrial adhesions. For us, we would love to have them removed, but we're so much more focused on preventing them from growing back, right? So with someone who has one of these patterns of imbalance, we're going to address it. Yes, let's get it to reduce, but let's also really focus on what caused it to grow in the first place and make sure that is no longer the condition in your body, so that you don't have to expect it to come back. And this is where I can really speak to my personal experience, because mine has not come back in 20 years ish. So to have such strong symptoms and signs of endometriosis, like I did, from the intense stabbing cramps and the clotty, irregular, painful periods, but also all those secondary things from the adhesions, like I was misdiagnosed with a bowel disorder. I was misdiagnosed with a bladder condition, all which were actually just endometrial adhesions sticking to those other organs and other parts and creating so much pain and inflammation there. So once we resolved the root of those things, now I don't have any of those conditions anymore, any of those diagnoses anymore. So getting to the root of it for me is super important with the women that I'm working with. And to be able to figure out which one of these imbalances it is the key to figuring out how we're going to resolve it and prevent it from coming back.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I love that all of these things that we refer to, especially even with the PCOS and now in the endometriosis, you have this personal story to really bring it home. Like, you've been through this yourself. You know what the journey's like for women going through it. And you're a testament to how much this can actually change your life, and following these protocols can really make a difference. But I have made a little note here and put a little star next to it because I'd really love to know how you sorry, don't mind me. You've mentioned strengthening your spleen chi deficiency. How would you go about doing that?
I do it, well, first of all, whatever your pattern of imbalance is that created endometriosis in your body,
Mm.
we will always be able to employ 5 different branches of traditional Chinese medicine. And those, what we do in each of those branches will just be slightly different depending on, or sometimes dramatically different, depending on which pattern of imbalance it is. With the spleen chi deficiency and the accumulation of dampness, we're always going to use some acupressure points, right? So first, or if you see an acupuncturist in the office, they would be putting a needle into this point. So I have people do it at home daily, because I think daily stimulation of the acupuncture points is even more effective than once a week or once a month needling. But I'll have you stimulate points on your body that are specifically to help your body drain that excess dampness that's been accumulating and causing things like cysts or tumors or adhesions even. Once we stimulate points like spleen 9 and spleen 6 to try to drain out any excess things like that are sitting around slugging up your uterus and your blood flow, then we can also add other acupressure points too that go for that ultimate underlying cause, the spleen chi deficiency in and of itself. So that one might look like stomach 36, another point also on the leg that is going to help to raise your digestive power and your spleen chi in general, so that you don't allow this to come back in the future. And then aside from acupressure points, I leaned personally on, and I lean heavily on with my coaching group too, the food therapy. So food modification is another really common, really classically used branch of traditional Chinese medicine. And for us, there's no such thing as foods for fertility or foods to get rid of endometriosis or any sort of like one size fits all list like that. Because again, we're not going for the end manifestation. We're going for the root cause of those symptoms and signs. So
Mm.
the food lists are going to look very individual for these, let's say, 2 different women who come with endometriosis. If one has the spleen chi deficiency and the damp stuff, and the other one has this liver blood stasis, their acupressure points are going to be different. Their food lists are going to be different. But the good thing about the food list is that while I might tell you for spleen chi deficiency and dampness that you need to avoid dairy products or any raw salads or ice water, some of those things can be considered temporary. So the good part about our food list is that they are there to do work. They are there to accomplish and resolve a pattern of imbalance. And once we have achieved that through a combination of these 5 different branches of options for you in traditional Chinese medicine, then we don't have to so much stimulate our acupressure points every day. We don't have to abide by a certain set of food or dietary guidelines as strongly anymore. So those are good. Some of the other branches or ways that we improve this condition would be to utilize breath work. So for spleen chi deficiency with accumulated dampness, we would have you do what's called belly breathing, or breathing that's specifically to improve digestion. If you have liver blood stasis as your cause of endometriosis, your breathing techniques here will be different. They'll be full body circulation focused rather than belly focused, for example. And then other things that we would have you do in the other branches would be like like what type of exercise is right for you. So again, we would never say these are the exercises for endometriosis, because if I give you one set, that would be good for you if you had the spleen chi deficiency with dampness kind, but it would be bad for you if you had endometriosis because of liver blood stasis. So if you have the first kind, the spleen kind, then I might have you focus on doing exercises and movements that are very gentle and very warming. So you might be someone who should definitely sit in a sauna. That would be really good for you, like a dry sauna, to help dry out the dampness, warm up your spleen chi, help digestion, prevent that from accumulating anymore and growing anything excess in your body again. But if you have endometriosis because of liver blood stasis, then your movement and exercise and body work is going to look opposite of that. It's going to be much more about full body circulation things, which would include like a massage, right? Like a full body massage, or walking, or something that circulates your full body. And sometimes I try to be fun and give like fun exercises, like the starfish crunch when you're laying on your back and you move all four limbs up in the air and back. It's things that move your entire body and circulate everything at once would be the focus for you if that's your pattern of imbalance. So see how those would all be opposite or different depending on what caused your endometriosis. And this is why there's so much disconnect between, I saw this in a forum or I saw this on a post online and it said this worked for endometriosis and I did all those things and it didn't help me at all. Or hopefully it didn't, it can make things worse too. That's so heartbreaking to me because I know what happened. Somebody posted a list of foods for endometriosis or exercises for endometriosis, but it wasn't for your type. It was for someone else's type. And I don't like to see people wasting their time doing the wrong things for their own pattern of imbalance. And I really don't like to see people do things that are worsening their pattern of imbalance, because it can then worsen their condition that's resulted from that. Other things that we can do can get really creative too. We can do like Qigong work. We can do different herbal supplements. So I do bring in herbal supplements, or herbal formulas, I should say, with many of the women in my fertility group, because they're very short term and they're designed to be short term because they are very powerful and they do very specific things and they do it quickly. So maybe somebody has a little bit of the dampness stuff, but they also have some of the liver blood stasis. That was me. I had 2 patterns of imbalance, and that's why it took me longer 20 years ago to figure out how to help my endometriosis, is because it wasn't just caused by one pattern of imbalance. It was caused by the top 2 common patterns of imbalance. So I will have someone do a herbal supplement for the dampness first and just drain out some of that excess goo and not promote the growth of anything new that's not supposed to be there. And then once that's under control, after a couple months maybe, then I'll have them use a different herbal formula that's specifically about moving that liver blood stasis. So now that some of the damp, gooey stuff is out of the way, we can really safely and effectively move your blood and increase circulation to help break up blood that's clotty and congealed, and to help effectively clean out the uterus, essentially, and also to help your body dissolve and process tissue that's in the wrong place, that's not supposed to be there at all. And warming things can also come into play too. Once we've moved out some of the damp and we're starting to circulate, we want to keep the uterus a nice warm place, because a cold uterus is not a hospitable place to grow a baby, and it's not the way the uterus wants to be. So it leads to a lot of problems like heavy cramps and heavy clots and all that bad stuff we don't want.
Now, you mentioned previously facial reading. Never heard of that before. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm sorry. I actually thought we talked about it maybe 2 episodes ago. But yeah, the facial reading, I don't talk about it a ton because I think it does sound quite woo. And I do try to ride a fine line of science-backed medicine and my doctorate degree of research and integrative medicine with all of the natural medicine modalities that have been part of that tradition for 3,000 years, which is just a very broad, rich, variant tradition. And one of the really long-standing things that have been used for millennia is facial reading. So in fertility work specifically is how I'm mostly looking at faces these days. But we can look a lot at the philtrum, which is the area above the upper lip and below the nose. So this area on the body is directly correlated to someone's reproductive health. So I do look at, when I ask people to see their tongue, they sometimes don't know it, but I'm also looking above their tongue at their upper lip and their philtrum to see a little bit more information. And that just gives me more clues. So if someone's philtrum is really flat across here, there's not these nice ridges, That's not great for fertility. It's a sign of low fertility, reproductive power. If you have nice ridges where it really comes up and it's almost sharp right there and right there, that's a better sign. That means stronger reproductive power. The length is the same thing. You want a nice length. So if your nose ends here and your lip starts right there and there's only like a millimeter of space, that's not a good indicator for a robust reproductive system. The width, same thing. You want it to be like, if it's just a pencil line of depth in there, it's very tight and narrow. That's not a great indicator for fertility. We want to see it nice and appropriately wide for your face. The other thing about face reading is that there's not a hard and fast list that I could give someone of this means this and this means this, because it's always about appropriate ratio for your own face. So somebody might have a long philtrum for their face, but that same philtrum would be short on someone else's face. So I can't give measurements or like in millimeters or something like that, because it is so specific to the ratio and proportions of your own body and your own face. So these are clues. If you have some of the things that I mentioned, or you have like dark moles or freckles inside the philtrum, these are just indicators. These are not determining factors that you will have fertility problems. These are just clues and indicators. So I know people who have really short philtrums that happen to be really wide and they've had 5 kids, or people who have beautiful looking philtrums are still having trouble reproducing. So it's definitely not a one-to-one correlation, but there are so many clues, like the one I mentioned earlier, those dark spots on the skin, that's liver blood stasis. So it's both used to give a general sense like, oh, good fertility or good philtrum means probably good fertility. That's a very general thing I can look at someone and say on their face. And the same with the chin. If someone has a really tiny chin for their face, that's not a great sign for how much kidney power they have. And for us, the kidney rules reproduction. So we want to see somebody's chin be appropriately sized for their face. My chin is small and I had reproductive challenges, right? A whole bunch of them. So I do see it come into play a lot. But again, it's never a determining factor. So I don't want to scare people. And that's, I think, maybe also why I don't lead with the facial signs, because I don't want people trying to self-diagnose and then get really scared that it means like they have no chance. That's never the case.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Now, I know that we spoke about the tongue, but is it philtrum?
The philtrum on the face.
Philtrum.
Yeah, the philtrum is this part right here. Yeah.
I've never even heard it called that before. That's interesting.
Yep,
And also chin and like liver spots. I've never heard of that before. But also, I mean, you mentioned that through all of these 5 branches, you can actually go and dissolve tissue that's not even meant to be in your body. That's so fascinating. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. There are so many things coming to light recently, just keeping up with new research and studies that I've seen in the last couple months even, or the years. There's so much coming out about this traditional or natural ways of breaking up things like tumors in the body. Like I just read one this morning about like they've finally figured out the science behind why certain sound frequencies can be effectively utilized as a treatment to break up a tumor and let your body dissolve it. That's something that would sound absolutely absurd 10 years ago or in Western science today, right? They don't think in terms of what we would call maybe alternative therapies or ancient wisdom or natural medicine. But when we look back at the traditions, we see that it did work. So endometriosis is such a great example of that, because Western medicine says there is no cure. There is no cure. If you have endometriosis, you have it forever. We can cut it off, but it will likely grow back and you have it forever. Versus my own experience, which is I was diagnosed with it over 20 years ago and then dealt with it and then did all sorts of lifestyle things that we mentioned, from acupressure and food and some herbs and exercise things. It's never come back in over 20 years, not a single sign of it. I don't have crampy, stabby periods. I don't have clots. I don't have bowel problems. I don't have bladder problems. I don't have any of the things that I knew I had when I had endometriosis. So is it cured? No one can say. I can say it, but I know that it's not accepted for me to say that. So I try not to lead with that in many forums, because I know it will be discredited. But looking at the evidence is what I like to do. So I don't like to rely on trends, and I don't like to rely on things that are new. So if it's only been something that's utilized for the last 20 years, to me, I'm like, that tells us nothing. It might have achieved something right now, that's changed your hormones in a measurable way on a test or something like that. But we have no data on what that's going to do to you long term. We have no data on how that changes your gene expression to your offspring then. Are they going to inherit it or are they not? Did you fix it? Did you cover it up? What did you change in order to make this short-term outcome that we don't understand the long-term outcomes of yet? So I am so far in the other direction. I look back at massive amounts of evidence. I want to look at hundreds of years or thousands of years of observation. I want to look at thousands of women or millions of women's outcomes. And that's what we have in traditional Chinese medicine because it is 3,000 years old and it has spanned millions and millions of women and couples and people. So we have the largest mountain of observation, which is what we call science today, is an observed. You try something and then you observe what happens, right? And that's what we call science. We have so much of that. And that's what I rely on, not these new trendy procedures or quick fixes or something that we don't fully understand the long-term effects of. I think that's a big, huge difference between Western medicine and Eastern medicine when it comes to things like endometriosis that are a little bit controversial to discuss like that.
It's really interesting that you even say the words quick fixes because I literally have written down in my notes here, quick fixes. And then it says lifestyle changes are hard. And
oh no, that's not the message we want to send.
Let me clarify that. I feel, and my thought process around that is more like we live in a really fast-paced world where we get everything that we need from the push of a button. I could be sitting here and I might finish a book and want to start a new one. I can literally press a button and have a new book appear on my Kindle straight away, like literally within seconds. So we live in a world, in a society where we want things now. We're not used to having to wait for them. And for the lifestyle changes that you're talking about, like food modification, people are so resistant to doing these things because it means change. And people have, what's it called? Immunity to change. Like people find change is really difficult. So even if they want something so badly, they are more likely to go down this more quick fix path that is going to not guarantee them a result and be like, yes, we can give you a baby, but be like, listen, these are the percentages that you're going to have a child. It's going to cost X amount, and force these things to happen through their body versus actually doing the work to make the lifestyle modifications and doing these things. It's almost like it's the same thing with training. People want the change. They want to see these changes in their bodies, but actually really sticking to it and being consistent with the sleep and the hydration, with the nutrition, with the consistent training week in, week out. It's those things that make the changes, but it's those things that are extremely hard to do because we want instant gratification. So I think the message that I was trying to get to is that if you're looking for longer term results, that could potentially happen very quickly because we've spoken about this before. When we might not be talking about years here.
Wow.
But be open to making some changes and actually putting some energy into some of the more simple lifestyle modifications, which even from a pregnancy perspective, if you are trying to fall pregnant and you're facing health issues like endometriosis and PCOS, putting that time and effort into making those lifestyle modifications and changes, whether it's exercise, nutrition, hydration, sleep, acupressure, acupuncture, all of these types of breath work. These are also going to help you through your pregnancy. You're going to have a better pregnancy for it. They're going to help you postpartum. It's about doing the work beforehand, and that's going to help you have a much better result because a lot of these changes, they become second nature. And that's going to benefit you long term. As you've said, you haven't had any of these symptoms for over 20 years. And interesting, I've had another guest on here who had stage 4 endometriosis. We weren't talking about her endometriosis in the episode, but I know she's had 2 children naturally, and she had stage 4 endo.
Same.
And she was told that she'd never conceive naturally, and she did twice without any issues. So it is possible, because I know that she went down that track. And I know that I've completely derailed this whole conversation.
No, it's all super important because it's right on. I completely agree. And I feel the same way. My doctor told me at 21 years old, I was just getting married that year. He said, your endometriosis is so bad, you are probably not going to be able to get pregnant. If you want to get pregnant, you need to do it right now. So their husband and I, at young newlyweds, were forced to say, we definitely want to have children. So I guess we're having one now, and start so young and so early, when maybe we would have waited a few more years. But I was very lucky to also have conceived 2 children naturally, and despite of that endometriosis diagnosis. So I love the stories, because that's what makes it possible for people. When I tell women that join my fertility coaching group, I could say statistically it's possible, 1%, 10%, whatever. Those percentages don't mean anything as much as talking to the other women who are doing it and who have done it. That's what makes a difference. And I think what you're speaking to is consistency, right? It's lifestyle medicine. That's what we call it, fertility lifestyle medicine, because those habits do become second nature. I don't carry around lists of things to do. I haven't for years. It's like a 21 days to build your new neural pathway connections in your brain. And after that, a month later, you could be doing all these things that are supporting fertility without even thinking twice about them. And you're absolutely right. It's not that I always tell people, your pattern of imbalance does not magically disappear the day you get a positive pregnancy test. That's not the end all be all goal, right? Isn't your health and your vitality and a healthy pregnancy and then healthy full-term baby that's also then going to have a healthy, vital life? Those are the goals, right? Not a positive pregnancy test. So those you can continue to do almost all 5 of these branches of traditional Chinese medicine that are tailored and customized to your pattern of imbalance, because it's not just causing you to not get a positive pregnancy test that you have. This is causing sleep problems, digestion issues, it's causing mood disorders, it's causing all sorts of things that we're all dealing with. Those are all caused by your pattern of imbalance. It affects everything from pain to sleep and mood and bloating, and not just your period and a pregnancy test. So I still have people work on resolving their patterns of imbalance after they get their positive pregnancy test. And in fact, the program I do now with women, it goes through the pregnancy, how to have a healthy natural pregnancy, and then how to lower your delivery interventions and to have a more efficient, effective, less pain related labor and delivery, plus how to recover better with postpartum tips and breastfeeding tips. So it really is a long process when you look at it that way, but we're also setting you up to be fertile 3 years from now. Not just for 1 year, but for all the years. So if you want to have another baby in a few years, you already have all the tools and you've already righted your pattern of imbalance that was in the wrong direction. You're harmonized, and now you can get your baby now and then another baby in a few years if you want one, because it's long-term lifestyle shifts that are making that real difference that's affecting all the areas of your life, not just one.
Absolutely. And I think you can definitely go down the path of using assisted technology to fall pregnant and using medications to force your body to do something that it's maybe not naturally doing. And I know that it helps in some circumstances. From my personal perspective, I would see that as like the absolute last thing that you do when you've tried absolutely everything else and you know that you've ticked all of the boxes. Because I've certainly seen people that have gone down that path and forced their body into a pregnancy, and their pregnancies have been horrifically difficult, like really difficult. And don't get me wrong, there's certainly people out there where it's amazing. They might not have been able to fall pregnant without it, but there are others that I feel like and this I guess goes back to that quick fixes thing, where it's like that's the first stop for them rather than the very last stop. When they've tried everything, they go there first, and they have terrible pregnancies and such bad nausea and fatigue, and it's almost like their body's like, I wasn't meant to be able to do this. I'm not handling this very well. And they don't enjoy it. Their bodies don't enjoy it. And it looks just very difficult. Not
Yeah.
saying that pregnancy is not difficult anyway, but
The
but
body
it's
was in that case. In that case, the
yeah.
body was literally screaming, I am not ready. I'm not even ovulating for you because I don't feel good enough right now. And then to
Mm,
force a pregnancy right into that situation, it can go really well. Like you said, there are some cases where it's like, sure, it went great. And there are so many cases that I see where it does not progress to a healthy pregnancy in a variety of reasons. And why? Because again, their pattern of imbalance that was preventing them from getting pregnant is also still preventing their body from enjoying carrying a pregnancy and for them to be able to have enough energy and chi and blood to keep themselves
mm,
going, let alone grow a whole additional person. That's a lot. That's a big ask. And I think it's
mm,
an interesting time to be alive because we do have things like IVF that can give you a baby, even if you have already lost your tubes. Like one of the side effects or complications, I should say, of endometriosis is that the adhesions can grow onto your fallopian tubes and just pull them out of place, twist them and wreck them. And you physically won't be able to ovulate and to conceive naturally. Maybe you've had the laparoscopic procedures to remove the adhesions, to remove the rest of the tubes, et cetera. And then you've done all the things that I would do with you. And now you are like optimized and you are 10 out of 10, healthy and optimized and fertile in every way that we would measure nowadays. But you still don't have your tubes. So we still need to do assisted technologies, right? So maybe they will
mm,
do IVF and their pregnancy will be fantastic and they'll have none of the other effects. But the research that's starting to come out about IVF, because it's such a new procedure, like I was saying earlier, we only have 25 years or 50 years of data on this in a big sense. The data is showing things like, did the IVF doctors take into consideration that the egg actually chooses the most compatible sperm for itself? It's not random. It's not the fastest sperm. It's the sperm that's genetically the most compatible with the egg that the egg lets in to fertilize itself. We've just now found out recently, a few years ago, that the egg has the front and the back. They weren't putting the sperm in the right side for so long. So these are just a couple examples of things that we do not know what we're doing with assisted reproductive technology in total. We are just scratching the surface of trying to make these things work. And is it giving people the opportunity to grow their family and have a baby when they couldn't otherwise? Yes. And that's why we love it. That's the beauty of assisted reproductive technology. But we can't pretend that it comes without side effects or potential complications, because it does. And we're just starting to learn all of them. So I like
mm,
that. I like looking at things like endometriosis in a more open-ended way. This is not, like we said with PCOS, this is not an end of the story. This is not a roadblock. This is not a permanent condition necessarily. There are certainly things that we can do to naturally resolve these imbalances that have caused things like PCOS, endometriosis, instead of, like you said, jumping right to the really invasive procedures before trying to nourish our soil, trying to resolve our imbalances, trying to make sure that we personally are set up to be as healthy and strong as we need to be to create and carry another person, and then to give that baby the best setup of genetics and nourishing soil as well for its life. So there's a
mm.
lot we can do.
I love that the egg chooses the sperm. I just think that's
I
amazing. And
know.
I also love that it causes a spark.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
they've actually got pictures of that now. I don't know how they managed to do it, but it actually creates a spark, which I think is really incredible. Now, previously you mentioned a few other symptoms, I would say, of these patterns of imbalance: your sleep, your digestion, your mood disorders. Are there any specific ones that you can really relate to endometriosis?
Oh, yeah, definitely. To go back to our main pattern of imbalance that causes most people's endometriosis, which is the liver
Mhm.
blood stasis, it's almost a secondary pattern in and of itself because it generally starts out in a lighter version, which would be liver qi stagnation. So just the energy of
Mm,
your liver is stagnated. And then if that progresses and becomes chronic, even the blood of your liver becomes stagnated and heavy and slow. So liver
mm,
blood stasis is its own major pattern of imbalance, but it usually comes after a long history of liver qi stagnation. So we can look at those two together. And that in a whole life sense, as far as signs and symptoms go, is going to give you a lot of PMS problems. So you are going to be someone who has a lot of mood swings, Irritability will be the name of the game for you. You will be someone who is very easily irritated, either at ovulation time, at PMS time, or all the time. You might be just very irritable and feeling on edge all the time. The associated emotions that go with that are also things like frustration and resentment, even really esoteric. The end of it is unfulfilled desires, the realization that you have unfulfilled desires. So a lot of that frustration and just resentment comes out as anger or irritability for people. And again, it might peak just at those times of the month, or if it's really bad, you might be like that all the time. Liver qi stagnation is sometimes called liver qi depression. And it's regional. So some areas, some schools of acupuncture will call it stagnation and some will call it depression. When we think of it in terms of depression, it explains the mood changes. It does. It explains that we might feel very irritable and then very low moods, and they might swing back and forth. And that's what we call the mood swings. The pain is really one of the main signs and symptoms of that, which we did touch on. But when we look at the tongue, we might see it look purplish. We might see it just look angry. It might look red on the sides where the liver is. It might look red on the tip, because if your liver is angry for very long, it makes your heart angry too. So you might see redness on the sides or the tip of your tongue, red or purple dots on the side or the tip of your tongue. And these things, you might not see all of the things I'm mentioning, and that's great, because that means that you don't have it so severely and so chronically as someone else might. So those are the main ones that I would say go with liver blood stasis and liver qi stagnation, which often is the first stage of liver blood stasis. So if you have spleen qi deficiency, you will be very tired. So you're just going to have like more low moods all the time. There's not going to be as much like fieriness about you or irritability about you. You're just going to be low or depressive moods most of the time or much of the time. When you get your period, you will probably be very tired. Like you're the person that needs to lay in bed for a few days when you're bleeding because you're just wiped out from your period. The bloating is usually a sign for you too. You might have like poor, sluggish digestion with loose stool. So maybe you get bloated and then you have like looser stool. Moods and emotions with this one would look more like those low moods, but also the brain fog part of it. So when you get dampness accumulating in your body, it slugs down every part of you. You might notice swelling in the ankles and you might notice slow brain function because everything about you just gets like gunked up and slowed down and weighed down. When you have your period, you might have the sensation that your uterus is like falling out, or you get leg pain in the legs. That's like heaviness pain. So really, truly, the signs and symptoms for these patterns are not just limited to your period or just to pregnancy test. It's like a very full picture of moods, emotions, focus with digestion, stuff going on, upper body, lower body, everything can be implicated depending on what your pattern of imbalance is.
I just think it's incredible. And I know so many people that have these conditions, or they might listen to a podcast like this and be like, "Oh, that's me. I've got that. I've got that. I've got that." And it might just like encourage them to look down this path. But if you had one thing you wish more people with endometriosis understood about their condition from an Eastern medicine perspective, what would that be?
I think it's about the common treatments. And when I say common treatments, obviously Western medicine has no treatments, but more of the Eastern or the natural therapies that people use for endometriosis. There can be some very effective things that you can do, but there is an order that the body likes to work in. And so if you've tried something like a castor oil pack for endometriosis, which is a very common at home or natural remedy that you might find by looking up online how to fix endometriosis by myself at home. Castor oil packs are very helpful for blood. So if your endometriosis is that liver blood stasis type, castor oil packs can be very helpful for that. You might find it recommended. If your endometriosis is from spleen qi deficiency with dampness, a castor oil pack is going to not help you at all. It's not going to move the blood, or it's not going to drain your dampness for you. In fact, it's a very rich, wet substance itself, very heavy. So it could possibly worsen some of your dampness accumulations versus moving them out of there like it would with liver blood stasis. So the things that you're going to look up on your own that might be all natural and might seem safe, they are generally, but don't be disappointed if it doesn't work for you. And if it doesn't work for you and it's worked for so many other women with endometriosis, that's a huge clue for us of which cause is your cause. Okay. So there's a lot of things with diet too that are like remove dairy, remove raw foods if you have endometriosis. That can be extremely helpful if your endometriosis was caused by spleen Qi deficiency with dampness accumulations. But if yours is caused by liver blood stasis, then those huge exclusionary dietary changes aren't really going to make a difference for you. And I hate to see people making these huge, sweeping exclusionary changes that, like you said earlier, are hard and not fun when they don't need to be made anyways. So I think I would encourage more people to seek that individualized plan and to not be so reliant on tips and tricks or believing that because something worked for someone else with the same diagnosis as you in Western medicine, that it's going to work for you, and to not be disheartened when it doesn't. That should just be another piece of information as to where your problem is rooted and what direction we need to move in from there.
That's so true, isn't it? I think that's very helpful, very good advice for anybody listening. And of course, we're going to finish off with the one question that I ask everybody, and that's, what's the one thing you wish all women knew before having a baby?
I'm going to go deep into traditional Chinese medicine history here for you. And one of the traditions and rules that nobody knows, which I think is really important, which is about your first 30 days after birth, which we call the sitting month or the golden month. There's a lot of guidelines about how to keep mom and baby healthy in those first 30 to 60 days after having a baby. But one of the ones that comes up a ton right away, and I want people to be prepared for, is that in the hospital or wherever you just had your baby, if you're in the Western medicine system, they will want to put ice packs on your perineum, and they will want to do ice packs if you've had tears or if you're having inflammation after birth. Do not let them put ice packs anywhere near your body, especially in your reproductive organs, because even Western medicine now, modern research is finally agreeing with us that cold is not the way. Okay, cold stagnates. It causes congealed blood, so you will often pass gigantic clots afterwards if they iced you after birth. So try to hold strong and really decline the ice packs if you can, and decline ice chips if you can, and really just focus on warm beverages and warm packs, if anything. But try to stay away from cold as much as possible those first 30 days, especially right after you've given birth and lost all that blood.
That's such a great tip. I love that so much. So, yeah, more amazing insights from you. Julie, thank you so much for your time and your incredible insights on all of that. I know we've gone a little bit off track there, but it's also important, really. And I think even those little side steps that we made there around lifestyle and not looking at quick fixes and doing this type of deep work around your health doesn't even necessarily need to take that long, but really giving yourself the time to work on your health and well-being can really make a huge difference, not just to, like you said, getting that positive pregnancy test, but how you go through your pregnancy and your birth and your postpartum and into your subsequent pregnancy. So I think that's such a great point. And again, thank you so much for your time. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And if you're hearing this message, I want to say a huge thank you, because it means that you've listened to this entire episode. Of course, if you have any questions about the things that we covered in this episode, or want to know more about me or my other projects, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram at The Pregnancy Process.